Hey everybody, let's go over the digestive system. Okay, so make sure you know the major anatomical structures and the major purposes of the digestive system. First, the structures of the digestive system include the gastrointestinal tract, which is your GI tract, and then your accessory digestive organs. So your GI tract is everything. Well, can I move this? I can't move this. No, I usually. Oh, there we go. Okay, woo. Um, your gastrointestinal tract starts on your oral cavity, and then it goes down to your esophagus. Your esophagus meets your stomach. Stomach empties into the small intestine, and then to your large intestine, and then out the rectum and anus. That is your gastrointestinal tract. It's a major part, major structure of your digestive system. The major purposes are twofold. First, obviously, the digestive system purpose is to eat food and get stuff from food, but the major purposes we need to know are as following too. First, we need to get energy from our food, and that primarily comes from carbohydrates, but that can also come from breaking down proteins or fats. And then second, we need raw materials to maintain homeostasis, right? So this is things like proteins and fats in order to build new cells. So the purpose is we need to get energy from our food, and we need to get materials from our food. Okay, these 6 actions of digestion, not necessarily steps, not necessarily happening in order, but these are the 6 functions of the digestive system, the 6 actions. The first is ingestion, where food needs to enter the gastrointestinal tract. That is when you put food in your mouth, and then everything else happens. Second is propulsion. We need to get that through the digestive system. So that mainly happens through the smooth muscle contractions of the muscularis externa, down through, say, your esophagus, and then also through your intestines. So propulsion is moving stuff through the GI tract. Third is mechanical breakdown or mechanical digestion. This happens primarily in your mouth and in your stomach. So when you chew your food, that is called mastication. You're breaking up those food particles into smaller and smaller particles. Now, the molecules themselves are still together, so we're not actually chemically breaking them apart. Mechanical breakdown is just breaking the food into smaller and smaller bits. That happens in your mouth when you are chewing. That also happens in your stomach, because your stomach is a muscular bag that basically squishes everything around, and that is also physically breaking stuff up. Next is digestion or chemical digestion, which starts happening in your mouth because your salivary glands secrete salivary amylase, which is an enzyme that breaks apart starches or complex carbohydrates into simpler sugars. Chemical digestion is when chemicals like hydrochloric acid in your stomach or enzymes like pepsin or amylase take the molecules and break them apart. So starches will be broken into sugars, and proteins will be broken into amino acids, and fats will be broken into glycerol and fatty acids. Next, and probably most important, is absorption. Absorption happens everywhere, but primarily in your small and large intestine, primarily in your small intestine, actually. So you have the increased surface area in your small intestine, which we'll talk about later, but that is when those nutrients, those amino acids, those carbohydrates, those fatty acids, diffuse into your blood and into your lymph, respectively. Last is defecation. Once you've taken all of the nutrients you can out of that food, then you poop. Okay, starting here, when you swallow a piece of food, I can change the shape here. Oh my goodness. That piece of food is called a bolus, and you swallow that, it enters your stomach. Once it mixes with all of the other food in your stomach, that is now called chyme, that fluid entirely. Okay, I don't know why I'm kind of grayed out here now. Oh well. The 4 layers of the GI tract, oh my gosh, all sorts of colors are happening over here. There we go. The 4 layers of the GI tract are the mucosa, submucosa, muscularis externa, and the serosa. The first of those is the mucosa. That is the innermost layer. It's named the mucosa because it is covered in mucus, because it secretes mucus. That is also where there's going to be contact with chyme. So in your esophagus, the mucosa has mucus, but other than that, it's pretty straightforward. In your stomach, you have the gastric pits. In your small intestine, you have the villi and the microvilli. So the mucosa will kind of change shape depending on the function of that specific section of the gastrointestinal tract. Second, you have the submucosa. The submucosa is full of blood vessels and lymphatic vessels and nerves, so it's highly vascular and innervated. And that's important because when you get to the absorption step, those nutrients need to enter your blood. And so the submucosa is what will carry those nutrients to the rest of your body. Third is the muscularis externa, which is this layer of circular and longitudinal smooth muscles, which then contract involuntarily to perform peristalsis, which moves chyme and food through the digestive system. Remember, that is propulsion. And then last is the serosa. That is the outside membrane made of connective tissue, and it is protecting all of your gastrointestinal tract and also connecting it to the rest of your body. You should also know that the lumen is the inside space that chyme flows through. So that is the inside space of that pipe. Okay, my goodness. Why am I blue? Okay, now I'm not blue. You love to see it. Talking about the mucosa of the stomach. I'm going to make myself small. There we go. The mucosa of the stomach. Again, remember we have mucosa and then submucosa and then muscularis externa and then serosa. When we look at the mucosa of the stomach, we see that the mucosa is very thick because obviously we're producing a lot of mucus so that we don't digest ourselves. But then we have these gastric pits, which are inner foldings of this epithelial mucosa, and they secrete gastric juice. Now, what's in the gastric juice? There's a bunch of mucus. There's also hydrochloric acid, which is going to denature the proteins. There's also enzymes called pepsin, which digest proteins. Now, protein chemical digestion happens in your stomach, but with pepsin and hydrochloric acid. Okay, then it's going to move from your stomach into your small intestine, starting at the duodenum, going to the jejunum, and then the ileum. Okay, in the small intestine, you're going to have most of the chemical digestion happening and the absorption of your nutrients. So let's take a look at the cross section of your small intestine. Again, we have the mucosa, submucosa, the muscularis externa, and the serosa. When we look at the mucosa and submucosa of the small intestine, we see these large folds covered in villi. These villi are these little hair-like projections, and when we zoom in, you can see that they're covered in microvilli. So that greatly increases the surface area with which your mucosa interacts with the chyme. Now, what's important about this is this allows us to maximize our absorption. So you can imagine all the surface area across these microvilli allow nutrients to diffuse into these cells and into the blood. So sugars and amino acids will diffuse directly into the capillaries in each villus. So make sure you know that there are capillary beds here. And then the molecules that are too large are the lipids, right? The fatty acids and glycerol, which are then transported into these lymphatic vessels called lacteals. Now recall that these are called lacteals because when those fats mix in with that lymph, it turns to a milky white, just like milk. That's why it's called a lacteal, like lactase or lactose. Okay, so in your small intestine, you have lots of surface area because of the villi and the microvilli. And then you have these capillary beds, which absorb nutrients, and the lacteals, which absorb specific nutrients, which are the lipids, the fats, right? Fatty acids and glycerol. When we are taking a look at the small intestine, the first part and most important part to know is the duodenum, because right when the contents of your stomach empty into your duodenum, then enzymes from your pancreas are dumped into the duodenum, and the liver and gallbladder put bile into the duodenum. Now, bile is going to help the oil or the fats mix into the rest of the chyme. Otherwise, the enzymes wouldn't be able to touch it. So it helps emulsify or mix everything together. And then the pancreas secretes a bunch of different enzymes. First, it neutralizes the stomach acid, and then it injects all of those different enzymes like pancreatic amylase, other types of proteases, lipases, and then things that also break down nucleic acids. So your pancreas is super important because it is what is creating and delivering most of those digestive enzymes, and they go directly into your duodenum. So again, imagine as soon as the contents of your stomach enter the duodenum, then the pancreas and the gallbladder and liver add all of those things to the chyme so that it's all mixed together and it starts chemically digesting the rest of those nutrients. Okay, that allows all those nutrients to then be absorbed in the rest of the small intestine, which is as follows. That would be the jejunum mostly, and then also the ileum. So make sure you know in the duodenum, liver, gallbladder, pancreas, add digestive enzymes and bile. And then most of that chemical digestion and absorption of nutrients happens along the rest of the small intestine, which is the jejunum and ileum. Make sure you know the order of the sections of the small intestine. Duodenum, jejunum, ileum. Cool. Once we exit the ileum, we enter the large intestine. The large intestine is also called the colon. We enter at this section down here called the cecum. If we go backwards, there's a little nook called the appendix. The appendix holds a bunch of beneficial bacteria, which are important because they help liberate more nutrients. And the reason we have this appendix is so that they can hide out there in case anything happens. We need to flush the entire colon. We still have a reservoir of good bacteria that can repopulate the gut. Okay, so what's happening in the large intestine? Well, first, those bacteria that live in the appendix and also throughout the colon are digesting the things that we could not digest. And they are liberating even more nutrients and some important vitamins that we would not be able to absorb without them. So we depend on those bacteria. So they are liberating more nutrients, so we're doing more nutrient absorption. But also, the major purpose of the large intestine is to absorb the rest of that water. We don't want that water to go to waste. And also, if we leave that water in our chyme, then it will be really hard to get that out in a very nice way. So we're absorbing remaining water, which then compacts that chyme into feces. That feces travels up the colon, the ascending colon, transverse colon, descending colon, and then the sigmoid colon, where it ends up in the rectum. Now, make sure you know the order of the spaces of the colon, which is very straightforward: ascending, transverse, descending. Then we have this last one called sigmoid. Sigmoid literally means S-shaped, so up, across, down, and around this little S shape. And then the feces is stored in the rectum until you are at a place where you can defecate, and then you do so. You have control over the external anal sphincter, kind of just like your urethra. You have an internal and external urethra. You have an internal and external anal sphincter. You have control over the latter, and then the former will relax afterwards because it is a smooth muscle. And then you defecate. And that's the end of the digestive system. Also, make sure you understand that your appendix can rupture. That's called appendicitis. That's obviously very dangerous because it's full of bacteria, and the bacteria would be in your blood, and that'd be a bad thing. If you have any questions, let me know. Or you can even just rewatch this video a million times. But if you have any questions, let me know. Bye.